All right, what is going on, everyone? It is Wednesday, February 20th. You guys could be doing anything right now, but you're here. And for that, I'm quite grateful. Another great day. I misspoke yesterday. Yesterday was not the last day before all the NBA people go back to those streets. We do have a nice four-game slate, couple showdown slates to talk about today, and hopefully people will continue to kind of fire at these contests. They've been filling up. And they've been a lot bigger, which has been really nice. Gonna go through the slate with you guys today, per usual, and then also gonna talk a little bit about what's gonna be happening going forward. We have some announcements as far as who won the resub contest, which was great. Shout out Doozy, had a awesome night on Showdown last night. And on the subject of Showdown, so. If you guys weren't in the streets last night, basically right before that Edmonton and Arizona game locked, we're just waiting around for lines per usual to come through the beat writers. And then kind of out of nowhere, Connor McDavid is ruled out. So basically it's the later slate, obviously. So a lot of people have probably set their lineups and kind of forgotten by this point. So in a situation like that, like Connor McDavid, highest price player on the slate, obviously in a pretty decent spot against the Coyotes. For me, that's just an instant scale up mode. Instantly went to the lobby, just got as much action as I can, as much three-man action, as much more double ups, more GPPs. Like literally, how much can I get down? Because anytime we see something like this happen, and people that have been kind of following along with NBA, like you'll be familiar with what happens in news, but a lot of times people react to that. In some of these niche sports, NHL in particular, people do not react to this. So we've done this kind of in the opposite way as well. So we talked about TJ Oshie the other night, was a game time decision most of the day. So a lot of people just aren't going to click that. And then we find out in warm-ups that he is going to play. So again, shove. I'm playing him almost no matter what, because you're probably going to get him under 10% on. Last night, Connor McDavid, I mean, he's always just piled on these showdown slates, right? He's the best player in the world. You'll find him probably 60, 70% some nights, depending on who they're playing. Ruled out 30 minutes before lock. He's 42% owned in the big tournament. Like, what are people doing? It was crazy. I couldn't believe it. Opened it up. I expected, maybe 15% of people just forget to change that after news. But not only was he 42% owned, he was the highest priced player on the slate. So anyone that played him was taking a zero, and they also were way behind in lineup construction for the people that actually just pivot away from a player that's not playing. Just crazy. And I was like, okay, maybe it's just a GPP. I start opening up my like $50 three-mans, my $50 head-to-heads, my 109s, my 162s, like that's basically the highest stakes you get in Showdown in cash games. And I started clicking them, and like half of these people had McDavid in their lineup. Just insane. I was baffled. So as far as lineup construction, that's not super important. So there's a couple players obviously that would see a decent sized bump as far as Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, Draisaitl, those guys that were very much in play even before McDavid was ruled out. I was a little bit nervous that the team would struggle a little bit more as a whole, just without McDavid, that presence, and kind of just a couple people filing into the power play units that maybe aren't used to having as significant of a role. We also got Cassian again on the first line for some value. So the Edmonton side was interesting. I ended up going a little bit lighter on Edmonton than I probably should have. And then I kind of just went mid-range the rest of the way with the Coyotes players that were, I mean, we've talked about it a lot on this stream. They're always kind of underpriced relative to kind of what their expectation is. So it was interesting. I kind of didn't love the value on the slate in general. Doozy obviously picked the right lineup construction, and it was to jam in Draisaitl, it was to jam in Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, it was to jam in Derek Stepan, all three of the studs, and then just trying to make it work from there the rest of the way. That's probably what I should have done. I ended up obviously spent some time trying to grab some more action. Wish I would have had like another 5 minutes or so to build lineups. I don't think I would have ended up on either of the goalies. I don't play goalies a ton in Showdown, but those teams ended up passing me in a low-scoring game. Also, like Keller in general just buried me. He's someone that's been kind of a high volume shooter for us historically, but he's been just brutal lately. He looked just lost out there. Only has a couple shots cumulative over his last 4 or 5 games, which is crazy for a guy that was so good for us last year and parts of this year as well. So it probably was a bit of a stretch to play him, but I was playing Galchenyuk, I was playing Stepan no matter what. So tried to grab a little bit extra correlation when in that range. Probably could have just played a goalie or prioritize a different type of lineup construction like Doozy did by getting up to some of those studs. So ended up being fine in cash games, believe it or not, just because so many people had McDavid. But yeah, it wasn't good enough to cash the GPP with the lineup that I had. So somewhat of a break-even situation for me, which is super frustrating after what happened with news. But it's such a really good lesson, I think, just if we get late stuff in some of this, it doesn't even have to be NHL Showdown, just like niche games in general. You'll see like drastically kind of skewed ownership one way or the other that can really benefit you and give you a huge edge. So regardless, the slate was won before the slate started from an EV perspective. So was a lot of fun to kind of catch that. And then in Classic, obviously we had some really big tournaments. We had a 100K tournament, talked a lot about a couple stacks that I liked yesterday that could go under owned. Florida ended up being the one that hit out of that. I ended up on an Arizona and St. Louis stack on my main team, which was fine. Ended up being good enough to cash most tournaments. Not a big score or anything like that, but it was fun to see such big contests out there. But the one other kind of news item that I wanted to touch on from last night's slate was Sergachev. So Hedman was a game time decision, I believe. And as soon as Hedman was ruled out, Sergachev kind of became like the best value option on the slate. We talked about it in the Discord. The big question was, would he go into Hedman's slot on the first power play unit for Tampa Bay? And you can check that kind of thing on left wing lock. So basically what I first did was go right there to left wing lock and check that. And I'll show you guys quickly how you can go about doing that. It's really simple. So you'll go in here and you'll go down. Let's go to Tampa Bay. And I basically wanted to see when he went out, Hedman went out the game before, who was on the power play. So we can basically do most recent game, but let's just go to the most recent 3 games. And what I did basically was go to most recent game, and I wanted to see what happened with Hedman out. And Sergachev obviously is the guy that was being slotted into Hedman's role when he was not in. So Sergachev was like right at the same kind of price point as guys like Oliver Ekman-Larsson. Bratt was right there, underpriced winger for New Jersey who scored. So those were kind of the value guys that I was looking at late. So yeah, pivoting to a guy like Sergachev ended up being like, I think 23% owned in the big GPP on Classic. Honestly, with that team total, with the weapons around him, figured he should probably be closer to 40% or so. Obviously, Point was ruled out, missed a team meeting as well. So down a couple studs in Hedman and Point, it made sense to kind of go after some of these underpriced defensemen for Tampa Bay. So that's kind of what I was looking at. But yeah, guys, it was a fun night in the NHL. I just want to kind of work my way through the chat here. Want to shout out the real Josh, tier 1 subscriber. 4 months, man. Thanks for being back with us again. Make sure you're getting that resub contest coming up here for next month for sure. Crazy night in the NHL, man. And Bishan's got a good point in the chat too. He's saying that NHL injuries aren't as reported as NBA. Yeah, I mean, so the Labs NBA Twitter is kind of what he's referring to. And for sure, that's definitely a big part of it. But so there's going to be Twitter lists that you can use, obviously, for NHL. I spent a lot of time kind of getting a good group of those. I'm going to make those available. If I can figure out the logistics behind it, make those available on Discord for Twitch subscribers. You can basically feed in certain Twitter accounts. And that's kind of the plan, just to kind of give the subscribers a little something extra, would be access to my Twitter list. So that's kind of how I find all the news, obviously, but also how I find the lines quickly on something like Showdown, where that stuff really matters. The real Josh, what sport y'all talking about? Soccer on ice? Pretty much, man. I think that this is like a fun time of the year because we get so many people that have never played NHL before, and they play it for like this very small amount of time, like 5 days or so. So hopefully we've kind of given you enough value, and hopefully you've had enough fun just to kind of add it to your game. Jay Sousa, obviously we've had him in the community for quite some time. He's grinding a lot of niche stuff, and he's like super pumped about adding Showdown to his repertoire. So Steve Boyton, same kind of thing. So went deep on sports betting. No NHL this weekend, man. I guess that's you've been mostly FanDuel, I guess, too. But the sports betting channel has been fire with Steve. Can't even do it during All-Star break, just dropping in since I long ago get to catch you live with the new stream time. Yeah, man. So I've been trying to go right after Manny, just a little bit easier to kind of catch Rays this time of year without the NFL bumps on Sunday. Just makes more sense just to do it during the day and kind of get the stream kind of done with so I can focus on lock and all that. I'm basically just fried after like 4 or 5 locks usually, just kind of want to relax. So kind of like just doing these in the morning gives me a chance to get some content up kind of on various outlets as well. Daily Faceoff is a good one as well, Frostback. I actually think that the 2 Twitter accounts, if you wanted to just follow 2 for news, Left Wing Lock and Daily Faceoff, they are pretty good on Twitter for updates. So yeah, I would definitely check that out. Good point, Frostback. I prefer Left Wing Lock for power play stuff just because you can actually see the percentage that these combinations have been at, and a lot of the times you won't get an actual morning skate with power play updates for the power play line. So that's something I'm looking at for sure. When's the first MLB stream? Need my baseball fix. Yeah, I'm still trying to piece together what guests are going to be on MLB week. Probably not going to be this coming week. Probably the week after we'll get a bunch of guests on for MLB and really kind of get our feet set for the MLB season. It's going to be, MLB is always a great time just because it's such a grind, right? In the beginning, there's so much great action out there. Everyone goes into MLB with like the best intentions, I feel like. But yeah, it's an interesting one. For sure, and we'll definitely be talking about it on the channel. So before we kind of jump into today's 4-game slate, do want to shout out a community member, Allie Boyton, with the resub contest. Took that thing down, so she was able to get a $100 credit at Monkey Knife Fight. So that was awesome. Her lineup was pretty solid. We didn't have a ton of people in the contest, so she kind of lucked out, hit a little bit of overlay there. So shout out Allie. Hopefully put that $100 credit to good use. All right, so let's jump in to the slate, guys. So the first thing that I do want to talk about quickly is what's going on in Colorado. So Jay Sousa asking me to kind of go over. So in morning skate today, Nathan McKinnon, Gabriel Landeskog, and Mikko Rantanen all are split up. So this is obviously one of the highest scoring lines in the entire NHL. It's nice having them together. Now they're all split up. And even if we're just looking at the power play, so they had this going in morning skate as well. Rantanen and Landeskog on PP Unit 1, PP Unit 2. McKinnon's going over there. So they're really shaking things up. From a DFS perspective, makes me like them a lot less for sure. So like the upside of playing this line is that they were just getting so much time on ice together. They correlate on even strength. They correlate on the power play, and drastic difference between how this team. So let's look again. So like over the last 3 games or so on the power play, 49% of the power play time on ice is going to be McKinnon, Rantanen, Landeskog, and some combination of a couple other players. So we don't have that anymore unless they kind of go away from this as the day progresses, or as the game progresses, I should say. So we'll see what happens with that. It does make me like them a lot less on this 4-game slate, but let's jump into kind of the team rating side of things before we look at Vegas and kind of break down the slate as a whole. But my initial impressions is the Avalanche much less, just because of correlation issues that we have now. All right, so this is the free team ratings page over at Fantasy Labs. It's one of my favorite places to start. If you've been with us through this week of NHL, I think it's a great spot to kind of get an idea of the slate as a whole before we get into everything as far as Vegas and specific players going by position. So Colorado does have the highest Corsi 4 expectation today. So it's not super surprising just because Winnipeg is like, out of nowhere, just become like this team that has really struggled defensively. So the highest Corsi against over the past month, and just their goals as well. Like Winnipeg's been not playing very well. It's only a 4-game slate. So trying to attack these spots where teams have been giving up a lot defensively is something I'm interested in. So For me, Colorado still, like I said it before, they're probably going to be more one-off plays for me today, just because that correlation is such a disaster now. But it is interesting. I think my favorite spot of the night still is going to be just attacking this Chicago team. So we talked about it a couple nights ago with Ottawa and Chicago. Obviously, that game completely blew up, but Chicago just can't stop anyone right now, and they're scoring a ton of goals as well. So the game always ends up being relatively high pace. So what we have here, 4-game slate, four of the 8 teams are in the top 4 of Corsi 4 expectations. So just looking at teams that shoot the puck a lot, Chicago and Detroit, I mean, somewhat below average, I guess, on this small slate, but the matchup is just so strong, specifically for Detroit, but for Chicago as well. I still think that this could be the highest paced game of the night. I wouldn't be surprised to see either of these teams be pretty close to the top in the Vegas lines, just because of that pace that should be happening. Lots of shots both ways. So yeah, both teams have a top 3 matchup rating. That's going to be one that I'm on for sure. As far as a spot to potentially avoid, I don't think it's a spot for the Golden Knights today, guys. I think that this Boston team, we've seen it time and time again, just how well they've played defensively. Even without Pasternak, they've still been playing well. Patrice Bergeron, obviously one of the best shutdown centers in the entire league. Boston is on the road. They are in Vegas, always a tough place to play. But I just think the upside from a shot on goal perspective is pretty low. This game I just think is going to be lower pace. So a lot of people yesterday, a lot of people played Carolina, right? And I understand, like, Carolina probably somewhat underpriced some of those pieces. They correlate on even strength. They correlate on power play. I get all that. It was a big Vegas implied total. Knew they were going to be heavily owned against the Rangers. But we talked about it on the stream, guys. Like, this is the same kind of thing. Like, it was going to be a slow-paced game. There wasn't going to be a ton of shots. I thought that was a great game to go under on and be underweight on. So that was a great leverage spot last night. I see it pretty similarly to Boston and Vegas tonight. I just don't think there's going to be a ton of shots in this game. And that's what I want first. Like, of course, the goals are great. I still want to bake in that floor where other people are chasing efficiency. It's like anything. So as of right now, unless there's a glaring value on one of those teams, I'll be underweight on that game of the 4 for sure. And then on the other side of the tough matchups, obviously Calgary, it's a weird spot for Calgary because they've been one of the best defensive teams in the league this year. Over the past year, best Corsi against, but recently it's kind of similarly to Winnipeg. They've really kind of dropped off as far as the goals they've been allowing. So interesting spot, I guess, for the Islanders. They are on the road, so not a great spot there, but I could see them kind of taking some shots at least on them in tournaments. They're a team that's played really well. So yeah, it's an interesting slate, guys. I don't know if there's like a glaring spot outside of the Chicago and Detroit game, but it's going to be an interesting one for sure. So Jesus is asking, what are you doing with Vegas Golden Knights? A lot of shot volume expected, but relatively low team total and goals for. Yeah, so I think it's a high efficiency spot if you think they can take advantage of it. Boston's just a really tough team that I'm never really trying to kind of attack. Hate playing Detroit one, but it's so tempting. Yeah, I never play Detroit. Basically, they don't shoot the puck a ton as a whole, but in general, they just don't score really a ton of goals either. So if any team can kind of get right or help you get right, it's playing against the Chicago Blackhawks. They are at home as well. So yeah, I think that Detroit's interesting. We're going to have to check and see what the pricing looks like on those guys and what the correlation is, though. All right, so let's take a look at Vegas now, see if we kind of uncovered anything at least. All right, so yeah, this is just a 4-game slate. 3.4 goals is leading the way. That's not very high, guys. Like, think about last night. We had some teams for 3.6, 3.8. So 3.4 goals is fine for Detroit. Interesting to see Chicago on the road with 3.2, pretty close there. So definitely think that that's the top game to kind of look at tonight. It would have been a great spot for the Avs. It's really unfortunate what they've done with their lines. I think that those would be spots where we can kind of pay up for guys like McKinnon as one-offs, but not necessarily full stacks. So yeah, not surprising to see this Boston and Vegas games expected to be pretty low scoring. And the line's already moved away from Winnipeg on the other side of that game. That's interesting too. So not a ton really to learn there. Let's jump right over to positions and talk about centers first. And all right, I got to fix this. So Manny basically went off super quickly today. So I was kind of throwing these overlays together very quickly. All right, so that should be a little bit better there. All right, so at the center position, the first guy that I do kind of want to talk about here, and it's probably, I don't know, it's kind of a cop-out in some ways just because we just talked about how the correlation is rough, but Nathan MacKinnon, still a guy that we should probably be looking at. So 97 percentile in shots over the past month, 99th in Corsi. I mentioned it almost every slate, I feel like, but Corsi is one of the most important metrics there is at the center position. So the matchup couldn't be much better, at least in the short term. Winnipeg is 95th percentile team in Corsi against over that time period. So definitely an interesting spot to kind of go to MacKinnon. I think I'll like him a little bit better on his own, but it's going to be kind of an interesting part of the slate for sure. Dynamic. It's one of those things you're probably going to have to get right as well. HX Hippo 0 with the follow. What's up, man? Thanks for being with us. If you're new to NHL, hopefully you'll stick with us after NBA gets rolling again. We'll definitely be doing some MLB in the future as well as we kind of get ready for, I mean, I shouldn't even say it, but get ready for NFL again. Always kind of preparing for the NFL season. So MacKinnon's always a guy that kind of stands out on this page to me if we're just looking at purely guys that could lead to a lot of peripheral stats. Patrice Bergeron's always someone that's in play, 99 percentile in shots plus blocks, tough game environment there. Dylan Larkin, I don't think I've seen him priced in this way in some time, 7,200 for him. Probably a little bit overpriced, but it is a fantastic spot. His shot volume has been a little bit sporadic, not really elite by any means, but I do think he's probably the top option in that offense. Another guy that's 99th percentile shots plus blocks guy, 98th in Corsi. So definitely like the spot for Larkin. Jonathan Toews, 7,400. It's crazy that they've really priced a lot of these guys up from where they were earlier in the year. If you're watching any of my YouTube videos when I was breaking down slates, like Toews was so cheap at the start of the year. The Chicago teams obviously really turned it on, but goals in 3 straight, and his shot volume's been there. So, I mean, Larkin, Toews just starting your classic teams with those two guys makes a lot of sense today. You're going to lock up a lot of peripherals and a great game environment. So, yeah, I like them quite a bit. Mark Scheifele, we haven't talked a lot about the offensive side of this game for Winnipeg at least. So 90th percentile in shots, 95th in Corsi. Like Scheifele's always a guy that's a little bit overpriced to me relative to his floor, but in tournaments, definitely think you can go to him for sure. Just not as much safety there. Definitely a lot more volatility with Scheifele than a guy like Patrice Bergeron, Nathan MacKinnon, who we can rely on for that floor. As far as guys that might be underpriced on this slate, let's talk a little bit about center value now. There's really not a ton of power play skaters, 4,500 and below. That's normally what we're looking for. But Carl Soderberg, he's always someone that stands out to me. So if you are fading some of the higher price guys in Colorado, I think he's a really nice way to save. Soderberg, obviously against this Winnipeg team who struggled defensively, like I said. He'll also give you a little bit of block shot equity as well. So 4,500 for him. I like the idea of going there when there's not a ton of value at the position. He's at least 90th percentile in shots plus blocks. He is going to get some power play time as well, leading kind of the lower end side of the slate in Pro Trends. So, yeah, I think Soderberg's probably the value guy at center that stands out the most to me. A lot of these other guys, not really interested in, to be completely honest. So let's move on to some wingers here. So winger is a position where we don't normally get a ton of block shots as well. So the first thing I like to do is just kind of sort by shot percent. Patrick Kane, 8K. Wow. Scary thing is he's probably worth it. Just how the Chicago team is kind of playing up and down right now with a lot of pace. Obviously, the matchup is better for the Detroit side of this game, but we've still seen Chicago play pretty elite offensive lately. Getting to correlate Patrick Kane with Toews together is very nice. It is also very expensive. But yeah, I think that those two guys together is another route to go if you don't jam in Larkin as well, Kane and Toews on that side of things. Jonathan Marchessault, I struggle with this guy because he's someone that like has been an elite shooter for us, right? But it's such a tough game environment. He's probably going to see a decent amount of Bergeron's line tonight. but he's still a guy that can hit value on his own. So one-off play only probably. Landeskog, again, like some of these things are a little bit inflated for these Colorado guys just because they're used to playing so many minutes. But 97th percentile in shots, 99th in shots plus blocks for Landeskog. He is 6,700, so we do get a decent price discount there. So if we're trying to think about which guys we could potentially play at a discount in this game, I think Landeskog, from a price perspective, definitely makes some sense over someone like McKinnon, and then jamming in some equity from this Blackhawks and Detroit game is kind of an interesting wrinkle there. But I think that's one to look at. Anthony Mantha, I believe he is still. Let's move over to the lines page quickly. So Colorado, obviously these are updated here because tough to see. But Detroit, Mantha is expected to be with Larkin on that first line as of now, on the first power play unit together as well. So Anthony Mantha is kind of an interesting one. I do like him quite a bit. 5K seems too cheap for a guy 93rd percentile in shots in this matchup, and obviously correlating with Larkin. So the big decision, I think, is Mantha and Larkin versus Taves and Kane. Pretty big discount if you want to go the Detroit route of that. Would definitely be interested in these guys in tiers as well. So we'll have to check and see what the correlation looks like in tiers after we finish going through positions. So let's take a look at the Winnipeg side of things, since we've only touched on them quickly. Not an elite matchup, obviously, against Colorado, but with all this kind of uncertainty with their lines, I think I still prefer this side of the matchup for sure. Just the Wheeler, Scheifele, Laine. So just looking at some of these wingers, Blake Wheeler, 7,200. I think you'll get some lower ownership than some of these other guys that we've been talking about, and you'll still get some decent safety here. So 89th percentile in shots is not elite by any means, but he's a guy that's playing every situation. He's also a guy that's always popping in Corsi, makes a lot of stuff happen out there. Let's see here. Patrick Laine this has been a really crazy one, all the way at 6K now. As you can see, like, he hasn't been hitting value. So hasn't hit his salary-based expectation in 10 straight games. It's just the shooting volume just hasn't been there for him. And when he's not scoring goals, he's really not that valuable if you don't have that floor. 78th percentile in shots, 69th in shots plus blocks. His power play shots are still there, 96th percentile somehow. So at least all of these shots are coming on the power play. I'm not super interested in Laine, to be completely honest. I think I prefer everyone else on this unit, taking in to consideration price. All right, so let's take a look at some value now on the winger side of things. Hopefully we have some better options than we did at center. So, all right, Thomas Vanek in Detroit. So that's one that I think makes a ton of sense. Again, 88th percentile in shots, 90th in shots plus blocks, but he is getting a decent amount of work on the power play as well. And we talked a little bit about Larkin and Mantha. Adding Thomas Vanek to the stack and getting more correlation on the Detroit Red Wings PP1, I think, is going to be a really popular route, but definitely a great way to save at 4,400. Definitely prefer him to the center option so far. But yeah, I think he's by far the top guy at 4,500 and below on DraftKings, at least at the winger position tonight. Really not a ton of other high volume shooters available in this price range. I will say that a guy like Austin Czarnik out of the University of Miami of Ohio, played against him in college. He is such a skilled player that I think that he's someone that we should still be kind of paying attention to, at least for Calgary. It really depends on where he's going to be slotted, but at 2,600, he's worth a flyer just because of the way that he plays the game. He did get some power play usage in the last game as well. Obviously, if you're fading the other Calgary shooters, he's a guy that makes sense to kind of grab some leverage and at least have a little bit of upside here. Let's see if we can get this game log to update. There we go. So yeah, he scored in 2 straight, but obviously there's just no safety here whatsoever with his role and his time on ice. He's been in and out of the lineup a little bit. He's one of those guys that's really not that valuable from a real hockey perspective unless he's scoring and putting up points. And there's just so many guys on this team that can do a lot of different things in addition to adding that offensive ability that he has. So yeah, if you fully need to punt off a team and need a guy at 2,600, I think he's at least in play on the kind of value side of things. So, all right, let's talk about a defenseman now. All right, defense. Had someone kind of bring this up to me in Discord the other day that I always talk about paying up at defense. I will say that defense, if I haven't made it clear before, it is one of the best places that you can kind of grab value as well. So we don't have a truly like elite option on this 4-game slate. The highest priced defenseman is Mark Giordano at 6,500. Jacob Trouba at 6K is the second cheapest or second most expensive. So yeah, so I think that this is still a great spot to try and find some value where we haven't had a lot of it so far at some of the other positions. There's not like a super cheap guy that really stands out to me, but let's talk about some of these top options first. Nate Schmidt, talk about how this game could be slower pace. He has been pretty safe lately. He's not a guy that I typically play, but looking past that last game, he has had a lot of shot volume lately, and he's always going to give you that floor as far as his block shots. G Van de Pen 12. What's up, man? Thanks for the follow. Thanks for being with us today. I appreciate it, man. All right, so yeah, the block shots really just kind of give him a boost, as well as just a guy that's seeing a ton of time on ice, also on the power play as well. Over 22 minutes a night. Not a lot more you can get for a guy at 4,900 than that. So definitely think that he's in play for sure, even in this slow-paced game. Shea Theodore is just a guy. He's like kind of like the Nate Schmidt, but like has a little bit more upside on that power play depending on where they end up slotting him. Same kind of price range, but definitely more volatility there. I don't love the slate for defensemen in general tonight. If we just want to try and grab a piece of Chicago, can always kind of go to someone like Eric Gustafsson. I think that he's a guy that makes sense given his price range, correlating on that first power play line for Chicago. Could be a slate to pay down at defense. So let's go ahead and look at some of the value options there. Rasmus Anderson at 2,700, Hippo's asking about. Let's take a look at him. Rasmus Anderson, so he's 77th percentile in shots over the past month, like that. 84th in shots plus blocks. Yeah, so a little slightly above average matchup. Nothing crazy there. But yeah, Anderson's a guy that he looked really good. So I watched this Calgary game like almost the whole game just because it was a showdown slate a couple slates ago. So he's got an assist in three games straight. Yeah, not a ton of safety here, but for his price, yeah, I mean, 2,700, like talking about Austin Czarnik on this team as well, probably prefer Anderson in this range if I had to choose between one of the two. Obviously, if we're just looking clearly at the power play unit, it'd be nice to kind of correlate him if you were on this Backlund line, but 2,700 is really nice there. If we're just looking clearly at his power play usage as well, 94th percentile on power play shots. So yeah, man, I really like him, Hippo. I think that's a really good point. I think he's a solid value option. And let's just say this too: there's a big difference between getting a guy at 2,700 and getting a guy at 4,500. That makes a big difference. That's like the difference between getting to someone like Taves or Kane in that range instead of someone in the mid range. So I'm always down to completely punt someone that I think is in an expanded role, and I definitely think that he fits that bill for sure. Seuss is asking about Sven Andrighetto riding shotgun with McKinnon. Yeah, let's check and see Andrighetto here. Let's just move over to, we'll keep you guys on this page so you have a little bit more to look at. So with McKinnon, so yeah, 2,500. Let's see what he's done lately, though. I mean, obviously, expanded role, not historically like a high volume shooter for us, but yeah, I think that at 2,500, same kind of thing, man. Just gives you, again, upside against Winnipeg, who's been giving up a ton of shots. You do correlate with McKinnon on the power play, and you do correlate with McKinnon on even strength as well. So I think I prefer Andrighetto to Kerfoot. So yeah, I'm with you there. I think he's real solid. He's someone that probably won't pop in trends or anything like that. But yeah, I mean, if you really wanted to just play McKinnon and didn't want to play him naked, just throw in these other cheap guys that are correlating on both even strength and on the power play. Yeah, so sharp call there, Sousa. Yep, I'm with you, Frostback. I think that we pretty much covered the value side of things now. Oh, he's 4.1 on Showdown. Interesting. All right, let's move over to some Showdown stuff now. But before we kind of do that, I will say, guys, that it's been interesting to see the action on these Showdown slates in the later slates. The ownership's usually even worse, and some of it probably has to do with news, but also like the correlation that I've seen for some of these these teams in the later games hasn't really kind of lined up, in my opinion. So we'll take a look at the later slate as well. It is that Vegas and Boston game, but let's start, since we were talking about Winnipeg and Colorado, let's start with that slate, and kind of get an idea here of what these guys are looking like price-wise. All right, so scroll down here. So McKinnon, 12K, Scheifele, Landeskog. Let's see if there's any of these guys that, so Trouba at 7K. He's a guy that's going to give us peripheral stats. And I will say about Showdown, I'm always trying to find shooters over guys that are typically more of shots plus blocks guys on Classic, just because shots are worth twice the amount of points in Showdown as they are in Classic. So I think that's interesting. I do kind of want to get an idea of what the shot predictions look like over at Labs as well. Obviously can't show you guys any of the premium stuff in models, but shot prediction, if you are using Fantasy Labs, that's basically how I'm going about making some tough decisions in the Showdown slate. So just looking at some of the guys that are popping kind of in that metric today. Yeah, there's a couple guys that really stand out, but the correlation again. So Landeskog, McKinnon, like those guys are all popping in the Showdown slate. Obviously, it's just tough because we can't get added correlation with them. Wheeler and Scheifele together is an interesting one, I think. If you did want to kind of fade some of those more expensive guys for Colorado, I think it's interesting to go with someone like we just talked about. Go with McKinnon. Go with some of these cheaper options with him, just because you're going to get to add in basically anyone you want from there. Let's see. Who's the other guy in that line? I'm blanking on his name. Andrietto. So from there, you really can jam in some of these other studs. So if you wanted to jam in Scheifele, Wheeler, you probably could do so. Still have 6,800 left. So that's an interesting way to go about building for this slate. Obviously, anytime we get a guy on the power play in the first unit and first even strength line that are underpriced, this is going to be a really interesting slate for sure. Andrietto and Kerfoot, even though their prices are at that spot, they're still top 10 in shot prediction, both of them. So definitely underpriced. I should probably ask you where to find that. Yeah, so if you are on Labs, anyone that doesn't have Fantasy Labs, by the way, this is pretty much where I do all of my NHL research, where I do all my NHL building. If you do want to check out Fantasy Labs, make sure you use promo code Holka, get 10% off. That's really not out there anywhere else this time of year. So would help me out, would help you out. But as far as the shot prediction, that's a metric that I created this past summer for Labs when I was working there. And they make it pretty tough to find. So you're basically going to be in models and you're going to go over to stats year. And basically the way to go, it's the last column. Let's just show you guys, whatever. No one's going to get pissed. All right, let's bring this over. Okay, so stats, let's just zoom in. So here's my model. And then we're just looking at, you're going to scroll all the way over. You see the pro trends, you're going to see my trends, and then you're going to look at stats for the past year, this column right here. And then you're going to keep going. S prediction is the shot prediction metric. And it's one of the best things I think I've ever really worked on over there, just because we did so much back testing, because it goes right into the props tool as well. So just kind of give you guys an idea of what that looks like in the props tool. So we don't have a ton that they must be going live literally as we speak on Bovada. But so you'll get to see our projection, our shot prediction basically versus what the odds are at Bovada. So Bovada has shot props. So I'm using that shot prediction metric for that a ton as well. So yeah, hope that answers your question, Doozy. All right, so yeah, I think that's going to be an interesting slate. Let's talk a little bit about this other Showdown slate that we have. We talked about Boston and the Vegas Golden Knights. I'm going to bring you guys back over to that page now. All right, so looking at this one, it's definitely, I don't like some of the prices on these guys. I'll say that. So Bergeron, I still think that he's totally fine in any matchup, obviously. We don't have Pasternak, obviously, but Marchand at 11.4. I don't really pay that much for Marchand historically, unless I really think it's kind of an elite spot for Boston, which I don't. I think that Vegas is going to be able to slow this game down enough to where just like going all in on Boston is scary, especially with that 2.6 implied goal total. But you can't really argue with Bergeron's volume. So I think he's probably still fine to build around. I think I still prefer Marchessault at 10-6, just for the shot volume alone. Like I mentioned, how important it is for you to get stack up shots in particular in showdown. So I think he's a guy. Someone else that's really popping in my showdown model is Colin Miller. So or sorry, Riley Smith. Colin Miller too, but he's pretty cheap. Let's kind of keep to some of these more expensive guys first. So Riley Smith. So 6,500 for him just seems way underpriced to me. If we want to talk a little bit about correlation here, let's move back over to the lines page quickly. Go to Vegas. So Riley Smith, you'll get him with Marchessault. So I think that both of those guys together on this showdown slate in particular makes a ton of sense, just because they do correlate at even strength. They do correlate on the power play. They're both high volume shooters. So I think that that's interesting. You can even add William Karlsson to that if you really wanted to. I always struggle a little bit with the Vegas guys because the correlation like always has me getting away from Stastny a little bit. But Stastny at 10K is a lot different than like a couple weeks ago when we were getting him at like 5.5. So his price is kind of getting closer towards what his shot volume has been lately. So I think he's fine on if you wanted to like kind of stack up the Boston side of things, bring it back with Stastny, I think that that's a more kind of interesting route. So Heinen is probably a place that some people will go for value because he is skating on that top line. 5,800 still pretty decent price for them, but you're just not getting him on the power play with these people as well. DeBrusk has kind of had that role, and he's at 8,300. So big price discrepancy here. If you feel like there's going to be a lot more even strength played, no problem with Heinen as kind of a somewhat of a punt. But yeah, we're going to have to kind of piece our way through this slate as kind of lines come out. So if you're interested in showdown, definitely jump in the Discord. We kind of talk about this the most like 30 minutes before lock, just because that's when we have like legitimately have all the lines locked in during warmups. So yeah, you shouldn't be building too long on these anyway, in my opinion. You can definitely overthink it to some degree. So let's touch on tiers quickly. Oops. All right. So the one thing that I talked about yesterday with tiers is that it's really hard to, I guess it's really hard to correlate on the big slates because they always put these guys in the same tier if they can to make it harder to do that. These 4-game slates are basically the opposite. So you can basically correlate any way you want. And yeah, sorry I missed this in the chat earlier, Gan Venepine. So since he's a new follower, do I post lineups here? I do not. Not kind of go into the lineup building side of things. We've kind of a nice thing going in the Discord. We're talking about the slate for, yeah, like Doozy said, 10 minutes of chaos to build. It's definitely something that it's fun to talk through the slate. And then Doozy and I and like some other people will usually like post what we landed on after the slate lock, so we kind of know what we're cheering for as a group. Yesterday, obviously, cheering for Doozy's team to make it to the top. He had a really nice build. But we're talking about the information, talking about guys we think are great value plays, guys that we think we have to lock in. But yeah, man, never really locking in lineups. You want to build your own stuff. My biggest kind of goal here is to just teach people how to play some of these niche things for NHL, because I think a lot of people get frustrated in the classic NHL side of things. And I think people that like hockey or just want like another niche DFS sport to play, like tiers, showdown, NHL, it's just a lot of fun. You don't have to worry about goalies and tiers, which is awesome. So yeah, we talk about that kind of stuff a lot more in the Discord than we probably do live. But yeah, so if you're new follower, new subscriber, make sure you jump in the Discord and jump in with us as well. Those are premium channels. So those are only for subscribers. The free channels are the player props channels. So we just went through like the player props tool at Fantasy Labs for NHL. We do have like a Bovada channel where we'll talk about kind of some props for NHL, for any sport really. But those are free. Just to kind of give you a heads up there. Hilfin 10 says you won't find any better than Holka. Thanks, man. Appreciate that. Hopefully I've at least shown you guys kind of a repeatable process with all of this. That's the goal for sure. So let's talk about some tiers tonight. Yeah, so wow, Lindholm all the way in tier 1 is interesting. I want to talk a little bit more about what you can do with stacking though. So let's just see, in Chicago, you can do something like Kane, Taves. You can add in DeBrincat. So the other night when the Chicago game went nuts, you had to basically choose between Taves and DeBrincat in the same tier. So nice that we can play both of them in stacks today. Strome did spend some time on that first unit. We'll see what happens with that. So yeah, you can basically stack up a good majority of this power play unit, which is kind of nice. So I'm interested in Chicago for sure in tiers. I'm always trying to correlate where I can, especially in tiers where a lot of people are not doing that correctly. So looking at Winnipeg, Laine and Connor together. But I mentioned how much Laine has been struggling. I got no problem being more exposed to Connor today, especially because I can still get in Wheeler. I can still get in Trouba, I believe is in here. Yep, Trouba. So more of like a 3-man stack on this one. Obviously, you can get in Scheifele as well for a 4-man stack, but I think I'm going to be a little bit more overweight on Connor than Laine today until he really turns it around. I'm kind of interested to see what the ownership difference is between Connor and Laine. That's going to be an interesting one for sure. Looking at Calgary, let's see what we can do with them. So Lindholm in tier 1. Gaudreau and Giordano in the same tier. So that's tough. Safer for Giordano, but obviously Gaudreau has elite upside. If you just wanted to stack this top line, kind of a mini stack, that's probably the way I would go about it. And then maybe have some shares of Tkachuk as well on that first power play unit. And then maybe you split some shares. You put in a little bit of Giordano in the Gaudreau spot. Yeah, so Calgary's a team that stacks really well tonight. Obviously, we can't stack up Colorado as well as we used to be able to, but Detroit's a team that everyone probably wants to look at. So Larkin, I don't know how to say his name. So it sucks that these guys are in the same tier. So if we just go back to kind of the lines page quickly. We go back to Detroit. Larkin, Mantha, Athena. God, I wish I knew how to say this guy's name because he always comes up. But so getting these guys in the same tier is super frustrating. So yeah, maybe a spot to go somewhat underweight on the Detroit side of things because we don't even get Thomas Vanek in tiers. Another way you could do this is kind of have some exposure on Classic and then really stack up this second unit. If it just so happens, that the second unit for Detroit ends up doing well, at least you'll have some exposure to that in these later tiers in a good matchup. So, yeah, Boston is a team that you can still correlate really well in here. I just don't love the upside for them, obviously. But anytime that I can get 4 guys from a power play unit, I'm super interested in having some exposure in GPPs. So if one of these games goes nuts, and we talk about this a lot with 4-game slates, if you get access to all the goals in one of these games that just goes nuts, you're going to pass the field pretty quickly. So, of course, I want to go through and pick who I think is optimal for each of these tiers as well, but I'm more or less sprinkling those guys in for my stacks. So the first thing that I do as far as process is I go through and figure out which guys in each tier that I really like. Then I figure out which teams are stackable, and I try and get more exposure to guys I like, obviously, on my sprinkles, but still want to build in GPPs around the teams that are the most stackable for sure in the best spots. So hopefully that's helpful. Yeah, no problem, man. Bobby Digital, what's up, man? Manny always gives you shit in the channel, but in his chat about NHL. But thanks for being with us again, bro. Only have a few minutes, but to listen, but we'll absolutely be watching this replay and get an idea of what it seems. Yeah, awesome, man. Thanks for being here. Rally Marty with 3 months, man. Feels like longer, actually. But thanks for being back with us. Prime subscription. Always like to mention that if you do have an Amazon account, you automatically have a Twitch Prime account for free. So if you're looking to get access to the Discord and you want to kind of support the channel but do it for free, that's the best way to do it. Twitch Prime, for sure. Should do a full stream of trying to pronounce names. Man, I'm actually pretty decent for some of these. There's just like a few guys that I really struggle with, and he's one of them. But yeah, that'd be pretty funny. Bobby Digital's a beast. What's up, Grizzly? All day, every day. All right, guys, that's pretty much all I have for today. So let's kind of wrap this up a little bit. Hopefully we get some late news again, like last night. That was amazing. But it's been kind of fun. At least getting a few more people in the NHL streets over this NBA All-Star break. Hopefully a lot of you guys will stick around. Probably keep doing these slate breakdowns at least until we get more MLB stuff rolling. It's going to kind of depend. I ran a poll on Twitter to see what people wanted to see, and believe it or not, people wanted to see NHL more than the props and bankroll challenge type stuff. So I think that I'm probably going to do more of this. Yeah, if you want to see the replays, those are for subscribers. But I will have some additional content going up on YouTube for NHL, just kind of work through some behind the scenes stuffs. But appreciate you guys being with us again. Definitely, if you haven't already, one of the best ways you can help out me is just make sure you're following me on social media. So Twitter at Joe Holka, Instagram / Joe Holka as well. Those are the two that I'm really focusing on outside of Twitch and YouTube. So if you found the Twitch channel, just take a couple seconds, go subscribe to the YouTube channel as well. Just search Joe Holka, you'll find it. Just kind of trying to increase the funnel, right? Let's get some more people involved in the stream. This time of the year, it's kind of a dead zone for a lot of stuff. People are kind of getting out of the swing of things with NBA after the All-Star break a little bit, but we do have MLB right around the corner. So let's continue to kind of build up this community. Appreciate all of you, and we'll talk soon. Good talk. See you out there.